Well, I think I go first and share the news. Let me just first say, Prime Minister, what an honor it is for us to have you here this morning. I know there are a number of Microsoft people, some in the room, many more watching online. It is such a privilege and a pleasure for us to start this week and this beautiful morning in Stockholm by welcoming you. And what a wonderful day to have you here. The opportunity that I have on behalf of Microsoft, joining you, Sophia, to announce Microsoft's largest investment in our history in Sweden. It's really an exciting day for us. We're announcing that we will invest and spend $3.2 billion in the next 2 years here in Sweden to build out world-leading, world-class AI data center infrastructure and combine this with other work to really serve all of Swedish society and really through the work here, many, many other people across Europe. And I'll just say briefly what we're doing is, of course, building. That's where a lot of this money goes. We're expanding our 3 data center regions here in Sweden. We're bringing to Sweden the most advanced computing chips, so-called GPUs, or graphic processing units, more than 20,000 of them here to Sweden. And through this infrastructure, really providing people here with access to the world's best AI capabilities. Now, of course, this is only as good as people's ability to put it to work. And we recognize that. And so that's why we're coupling this investment in infrastructure with an investment in skilling, a program to reach and serve and support 250,000 people, 250,000 people here in Sweden, to provide them with the skills, whether they're in school, whether they're already in the workplace, whether they're not working but want to use AI in their personal lives, so they have the skill set to be at the forefront of this new technology. These are skills that, in part, every user needs. Every one of us will find, I think, increasingly in the coming years wanting to put this technology to work. But it's also specialized skills for software developers, as well as the kind of skills that organizational leaders need in order to implement this in their organizations. And we see this fundamentally interconnected with the strengths of the Swedish economy. One of the things I always enjoy about coming to Sweden is that there are very few places in the world where you just see such a broad spirit of innovation. You see so many leading industries that have a leading Swedish company at the forefront of global competitiveness. Whether you're thinking about, say, automobiles or the retail sector or the financial services sector, the healthcare sector, or just, say, listening to music with our friends down the street, there almost certainly is somebody, a company here in Sweden that is at the forefront. So we see this as an investment in enabling and ensuring that Sweden remains at the forefront of global competitiveness. But there's a third dimension that I would underscore as well. Given the role that AI is playing in the world, it is critical that we as a company take a whole of society approach, that we ensure that we're serving Sweden well. We need to be a trusted local provider. Now, in some ways, that's more challenging in the world of 2024 than even 5 years ago. The cybersecurity needs of Sweden, of Europe, of the world are more acute than they were 5 years ago. That is an important part of what it means to operate these data centers here. But it's really together with a set of commitments to society, what we call our AI access principles. We are not building this infrastructure for Microsoft. We're building it for Sweden. And so these principles make clear that anyone can use this infrastructure to train their AI models or deploy AI models to serve people here in Sweden. It means that we treat people fairly, that if they want to put their data in our data center, it's protected by EU and Swedish law, that we don't use their data to compete with them, that people can create an AI model and they can provide it to the public. They don't have to use the store that we have created on Microsoft Azure. they can just provide it separately if they wish. That users, companies, individuals can put data in our data center, put AI models in our data center, and if we don't do a good job of supporting them, they can easily move it somewhere else. But really today it also means two other things. One is just a very broad set of commitments around sustainability, skilling, the protection of cybersecurity and privacy, and responsible AI, with a particular emphasis, I would say, here in Sweden, perhaps especially on sustainability. Because a big part of the reason we're able to do this is because of Sweden's forward-looking energy policy, the plentiful access to green energy, whether it's carbon-free energy or renewable energy. It's because of a partnership with a company like Vattenfall that has been so important to our growth here. And so part of what we're doing here is committing ourselves, to run these data centers with the world's best water conservation and the broadest commitment to the use of green energy. But at the end of the day, it's not only about serving a country and a continent, it's about being part of a local community. We appreciate that data centers create jobs, but they also create traffic. And traffic needs good roads. And hence our data center community pledge, which we're also announcing here in Sweden for the first time, really puts Microsoft on a path I hope you'll find to be a great neighbor, focusing on the environment, focusing on local jobs, and focusing on local community needs. I will say at the end of the day, we hope that this investment will serve Sweden and will serve all of Europe. But we could not do this without the support of wonderful people here in Sweden itself. People who work at Microsoft, people who work with our partners, people who lead and work for the government. So, Prime Minister, let me conclude by thanking you for your leadership, for the clarity that you and your government have provided to us, and I think to our entire industry. The kind of policies that you have brought to Sweden that are giving us confidence to make these large investments. I think it makes it possible for us to lean in and I hope be an important part of Sweden's future. So thank you very much.
And thank you, and thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be here, really. I have a long-lasting interest in the interface between, let's say, government and technology, or politics and technology. And I worked myself some 20 years ago in a Swedish IT consultancy, and as I told you, I realized that now you are doing not only things we were talking about, but you are doing things we didn't even talk about. That's the kind of the speed of the change occurring right now. Just a few words. Even though Microsoft has been present here in Sweden for many years, I think this is actually kind of a new level of commitment that we highly value in Sweden. The investment is, of course, important in itself, but it also, I think, reaffirms the feeling we have that Sweden is a good place for tech investments like yours. And allow me just to briefly point out a few reasons why and things we are working with right now. One is, of course, the advanced technology education, having strong research and innovation legacies in Sweden. You mentioned a few of them in, so to speak, new areas, but also in very kind of traditional industrial areas also that are used to implement new technologies in legacy investments, innovations. But also, I think, long-standing investments in physical and digital infrastructure, where we used to be world-leading. We are now talking a lot about the risk for Europe, and Sweden is obviously part of Europe, to lag behind in terms of 5G infrastructure rollout, and we're working a lot with that. But also our restarted focus, and you mentioned that as well, on clean energy, with a reliable, affordable, fossil-free, to some extent in nuclear, to some extent in renewables. And we think there are no reasons at all to exclude any kind of any source of fossil-free energy. And we are right now we are trying to work intensely together with other European countries as well in doing that expansion. And I believe this huge investment in Sweden has the potential to pave the way for more investments and increase technological excellence that you might attract even other companies to do the same thing. I especially note the ambition to strengthen competence in an inclusive way to help more Swedes become AI competent or at least more knowledgeable in the field of this. I think that relates very well and connects very well to a very long tradition we have of reskilling, upskilling workforce in Sweden. We've had, I think, very many decades of good tradition. AI is a tech transformation that should be seen as a multiplier or a catalyst for many other things. And I still think we undervalue the potential in this field. It won't only have the impact on how we run business, but also help accelerate development in other areas. Biotech is one good example for that, where algorithms speed up the development itself. Software development is another area where I think AI will automate and thereby make it more efficient. The Swedish government quite recently appointed an AI commission. That is not a very original idea in itself, because many countries do that, but we have extremely good reasons to think very hard on this. We commissioned the former Ericsson CEO and now the Volvo Group chairman, Carl-Henrik Svanberg, to lead it. And he's in a hurry, I can tell you that. He's always in a hurry, but not least here, because he thinks that things are going too slow in Europe, and we being a part of that, and he looks very closely to what's happening in US and in many Asian countries right now. I think the idea we asked him to develop is actually how to use the fact that Sweden is a leading research nation and an advanced industrial nation, and to build on that legacy, when we also try to implement new technologies into old technologies. I think he's on the right path, and they will report back. Actually, he asked for my permission to make his report 8 months earlier. That had never happened before, I can tell you that. Normally, people ask for prolonged time to be able to fulfill their obligations, but this is too much of a hurry, so we need to be quicker. I think in the long run, this too is an important when companies decide to invest here. And this morning, the news of Microsoft in Stockholm is an example how we want to attract more investments to Sweden in order not only to be a good place for your investments, but also, of course, to increase Sweden's growth and Sweden's competitiveness in the European and the global competition. So I highly appreciate this, and I really hope you will have, in a broader sense, a good stay here in Stockholm. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So we will open up the floor for a few questions from the press. We can start with SVT in the front here. And wait for the mic, please.
Double mics today. Okay, so the basic question, why Sweden? And specifically the energy situation. How important is cheap energy? How important is renewable or fossil-free? And would you considering investing not only in renewables but also in nuclear power in Sweden?
I think fundamentally when we look at where to invest, we look at two things. One is people and the other is energy. So you captured, I think, the energy dimension. I would underscore that it always is critical to build something that people are going to use. It's not very exciting to build buildings that then sit empty because the computers are being underutilized. So I would never understate just the critical importance of the innovative and broad Swedish economy. But I also think that the energy access is equally important. I think the most important thing for energy is that it be green. and that means it be carbon-free. Here, part of what is so attractive about Sweden is hydroelectric power, and a company like Vattenfall that has been really focused on not just providing capacity, but really doing it in a way for several years that has been using AI itself to be more efficient. But we look to a future where we see wind power here. We're investing in that. We do see a future globally where the next generation of nuclear power will likely be important. So I think you'll see us leaning in as a company, not only to the kind of nuclear power plants that exist today, but so-called small modular reactors or fourth generation nuclear reactors. We hope that there will be a day when fusion power will enter as well. And obviously, globally, there is a lot of competition, not just over having carbon-free energy, but having inexpensive carbon-free energy. So there is a lot of price sensitivity in all of this. I think the thing that frankly makes Sweden so attractive is if you line up everything that matters, Sweden tends to be strong when we look at it. And so it is an easy country to make a bet. And then you add you don't create that kind of strength without great political leadership and a great economy. So all these things come together.
Throwing in $1 billion to Swedish nuclear power.
Well, we're not making any announcements about that today. But I would just say, if you just look globally and you look here at Sweden, the 2020s are fundamentally going to need to be driven by hydroelectric power, investments in solar and wind, the nuclear power capabilities that exist today. At the same time, we're looking to the 2030s as a time where we would hope that, say, the next generation of small modular reactors or other advances in nuclear power would be important.
Another question right next to SVT.
Hi, Marcus Alexandersson, TT News Agency. Question for both of you. We have an upcoming election here in the European Union. AI has been a topic of discussion in regards to disinformation in that sense. How do both of you see AI as a potential force for disinformation, but also a potential force for good?
I would say two things. I mean, first, I think we have to recognize the risks that AI can create in the context of creating abusive content. And one form of abusive content would be AI-generated deep fakes. And so we have been monitoring that situation very closely. The good news is obviously the EU elections are almost upon us. We've done more work here in Europe the last 6 weeks to just get out and train candidates for the European Parliament, to work with them, to use our capabilities to really monitor the situation. And by and large, we have not seen an energetic effort to try to exploit these elections through the use of AI and deep fakes. I think, if anything, our biggest concern, to be honest, is about the Russian government. And we've been monitoring that closely, and we've seen an increase in Russian activity using deep fakes. But in recent months, it has not been as focused on these elections as what we're seeing right now, for example, with a focus on the Paris Olympics and that type of thing. But this is the kind of danger for the future that we need to address and protect against. And that's going to require more work by governments. It's going to require some new laws. It requires capabilities in the tech sector. And I think fundamentally it requires the use of AI to defend against abuses that others are advancing with AI. So, it is a new dimension to a long-standing challenge and problem.
I would say I basically share those comments. And obviously, I mean, the risks for disinformation is not a new one. We have seen that for a long time. Perhaps we have seen it longer than we realize. That's the real disinformation. And we are increasingly aware of those risks right now in election campaigns, and also on a European level. I have a lot of talks with the European Parliament, the Speaker, Roberta Metsola, and she's extremely aware of these. Later today, I will host Ursula von der Leyen here in Stockholm, and she is also extremely aware of all those risks that creating some non-trustworthiness of the election results. We gathered all the party leaders in Stockholm just a few weeks ago to in detail discuss the risks of these coming last weeks, and I think we almost agreed on the fact that if something that sounds extremely unbelievable, if that happens, perhaps it didn't happen. So just to kind of teach ourselves to be very careful. But I would say AI only kind of accelerates that. In principle terms, we've seen it for a long time, but the risks increase with AI. I think this is one of these very interesting interfaces where we need to have very close cooperation between tech companies and governments, even closer than we are used to. I'm fully aware of the need for full transparency. We have different kind of logics. We have different. You have shareholders. We have voters. There are extreme good reasons for taking that seriously. But we need to understand each other's daily business, so to speak. If politics goes kind of out of touch with what's happening in the tech sector, we simply won't be able to foresee neither the risks nor the opportunities in this. And I think you, for good reasons, you have very good reasons to understand how politics sometimes need to regulate things. The risk I see right now is obviously that the European Union has a tendency to start with the regulation part of it. And I think it is hard in the long run to be you cannot be a technology provider if you always start in regulating things that doesn't exist already. That is a tendency that the EU has, and that does not mean I don't acknowledge the fact that we might need different forms of European regulations and even connected to other parts of the world. We were just discussing the G7 initiative right now. I think that's a very good idea. But I would kind of warn slightly for this ambition to always start in the regulatory idea of technology.
We have another question here.
Good morning, Shupanta from Reuters. One for Brad, one for Wolf. When you talk about advanced GPUs, are you talking about NVIDIA H100s or something else? And for the Prime Minister, what kind of benefits you have offered to attract this level of investment? And are you in talks with other cloud providers? Thank you.
And to answer your question, I think we're talking initially about chips like the NVIDIA H100. You will see us increasingly diversify the chips that we have around the world, and by definition here in Sweden, we've been public about being very bullish on NVIDIA, but also AMD and ultimately some of our own chips as well. And we think always in terms of the capabilities and having the world's best capabilities here in Sweden.
Well, first of all, to avoid misunderstandings, it's not Sweden as a government that makes these these agreements. So that's important to say. So we try to provide best possible preconditions, and I think you mentioned a few of these, and if they are correct, I'm proud of that. And we still realize that there is always enormous potential for improvement, nevertheless. But I would say the energy part of it, I would say the innovation legacy part of it, I would say the awareness of the need to reskilling all the time. That these are good traditions and good capabilities we bring with us, and if that is a good reason for other companies to make deals that make Microsoft in this case able to invest, I think that's a very good thing. But so I'm hands off in that sense. We don't do this in a Chinese way. That's important to state that, but we try to create very good preconditions for good investments climate in Sweden.
Thank you. That's all we're having time for today. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening in to this exciting time at Microsoft. If you have any further questions regarding the announcement, then feel free to reach out to us at Microsoft.
Great. Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.